Let's get started. Now, this is delightful. Here, I'll speak into the microphone. This is delightful because we have an hour just with Michael. This is Michael, I already forgot. Gwosdz. This is Michael Gwosdz.
Forget about that.
And we are just delighted to have him here to tell us about how things stand in Germany. And Michael, you've, I'm sure, read his bio, but he studied political science. He worked in civilian service and as a nursing assistant in outpatient care. He's been a consultant in civic education. He's had numerous government appointments in interior and sport, labor, social affairs, family, and integration. He is a spokesman for religious policy in the Green Parliamentary group in the Hamburg Parliament in Germany. And he's been in that position for about 4 years, almost 4.5 years. And he's going to be speaking to us in German. So we'll turn the time over to him, to Michael, and then we have until 4 o'clock. So he'll present to us and we'll have some time for Q&A.
Yeah, the first words will be in English. I have to thank, of course, Brett Scharfs and Elizabeth Clark again, like all the other people, for organizing that amazing event and giving me the great opportunity to participate here. I'm also thankful to Ralf Grünke for introducing me to this event and making it possible that I got an invitation. It's a great chance. Thanks, Ralf. And I'm glad that Holly didn't mention that I'm also the party whip, because sometimes maybe people think about Frank Underwood. But I have to admit, in real life as a party whip, you use more the cross-cultural competences in deliberating between the different people of your parliamentarian group, and you don't push awful press reporters in front of the underground train. I have the chance to speak in German, as we have wonderful translators. So you both have the chance, either you practice your German, or you can participate in this wonderful work of our translators, who guided me through the conference over the last 2 days. I have been already introduced, and I have to switch to my presentation. Germany.
What channel? Lance, you know what channel? 7.
Ah, yeah, here is a channel 7. Above it's 18. So that's me. And I want to start with jetzt muss ich mich selber daran gewöhnen, dass ich auf Deutsch vortrage. Ich möchte anfangen mit einem Posting, einem Instagram-Beitrag eines jüdischen Freundes von mir, Armin. Auf dem Foto sieht man Armin zusammen mit einer jüdischen Armin selber ist ein jüdischer Aktivist, und man sieht ihn zusammen mit einer muslimischen Aktivistin und unserer Ministerin für Familienangelegenheiten. Also Lisa Paus, sie ist auf Bundesebene in der Bundesregierung Familienministerin. Und er hat zu diesem Post geschrieben vor ein paar Tagen: Dieses Foto ist nicht nur symbolisch, sondern ein bedeutungsvolles Erinnerungsstück. Über Jahre hinweg haben wir einen respektvollen und konstruktiven Dialog geführt, basierend auf gemeinsamen Werten und gegenseitigem Verständnis. Vielleicht ist es für Sie, für euch hier in dieser Konferenz ganz normal, ein Bild von einem jüdischen Menschen mit einer muslimischen Frau und einer Vertreterin der Politik zu sehen. Mich als Deutschen berührt das immer noch sehr. Und wie kommt es dazu?
It still touches me. Now I quick jump into the German history. Germany has a very moving history in regards to different faiths. The persecution of religious minorities has strongly shaped today's awareness of the importance of the religious freedom. With the persecution and extermination of European Jews, Germany was responsible for the most excessive of hostility to religion. This is why yesterday we had this this repetitive day of where we remembered the events from last year, how our Jewish brothers and sisters were treated. After World War II, there was a mandate for our state to protect religions and the practices of law. And I think that's different between our and some other countries. After World War II, the two regular Christian churches were established, but that changed because of migration since the 60s, we have a greater religious diversity. There are over 5 million Muslims in the country. In the city of Hamburg, we have more than 300 churches, mosques, and temples of over 120 religious communities. This diversity presents the country with the challenge of maintaining the balance between religious freedom and integration into a secular society.
Und ich werde gleich an
And I will connect something else that has been.
richtig, ja.
Am I right here? Okay.
Genau, also
That was. It's between the balance of freedom of religion, and we have over 200 accepted religious groups, but in the US there are over 2,000. So over 200 is challenging for us, but it is in comparison really small. What else is different? We don't have a tendency of having more religions, but we also have a tendency that there are more and more people that don't belong to any confession, that are atheists. There are 38% in Germany, and in the US 29%. For me, it's important when we talk about the people without atheists, that we also have to pull those into these conversations. That means when you don't know anything about the churches, then you don't understand a lot of things that we have in our history, in our culture, and our society.
der rechtliche Rahmen in Deutschland für Religion.
The legal basis,
Die Geschichte Deutschlands ist
the basic law protects all religions from discrimination, including minorities such as Muslims and Jews, whose presence has increased due to migration in recent decades. The German we support churches. We have church taxes from big organizations. We took the money and tax them and give it to the churches. And I don't think anywhere else in the world besides Austria has the same rule. Something else is that we have in German education, we have classes in our school. We have contracts. In the US, it's a little different because of the First Amendment. There's a strict separation of state and religion. The Congress, this means that the state does not favor any religion and that religious groups exist in the US without government funding. Germany supports religious education, and it is
English. Religious education shall be part of the curriculum in public schools, with the exception of non-denominational schools. These non-denominational schools, they don't exist really in Germany. It's just a clue. Und damit legen wir eine Basis für etwas, was wir...
And with this, we lay the basics for something that we've heard over the last 2 days. Hamilton Max Thomas, rich children have to learn religious tolerance. Alexander Lashko said, respect leads to respect. Ishma Jahan said, schools can send a signal of acceptance. And all those things we try in Germany to reach in religious classes in school. But in Hamburg, we try something else on top. Those rights lead to different states. Hamburg is one of these states. And the other 15 religious classes are divided. So the Catholics have Catholic classes, the Protestant have Protestant classes, and the Muslimic kids, if there is one for Muslims, and so on. In Hamburg, we have religious classes. We call it Rufa 2.0. 2.0 because they've been around for a long time. The Protestants said that we will open our religious classes for all the children, and we invite all religious children to participate in it. And since 2020 is this a public model.
Das Ziel für alle ist, dass die Schülerinnen aller
The goal is that all the children agree on a common curriculum and all learn together with the ones that are not religious. And it causes strong peacemaking characters. Now it's a special question, who teaches this? The teachers that teach are all state certified teachers from different religious traditions, and these teachers have successfully completed a state teacher training course and a preparatory service. So it's not the religious organizations that send a teacher, but in the University of Hamburg, there are corresponding professorships for Protestant, Catholic, and Jewish theology, and now also for Islam and Alvaism have been newly created. In addition, a training system has been set up to prepare teachers in different faiths for religious from all education. Also for Baha'i and Hinduism and Buddhism, and they all sit together, and all the religious organizations come together and decide what the children should be taught, and not the government. That in its own, in a world like today, where there are so many conflicts about religion, that's really unique that these religious organizations can cooperate and work together. What do we have in common? What are the cores? What should the others know about us? We have somewhere in the breakout session from Indonesia with the concept of the cross-cultural religious learning, the idea of trainings for teachers. And some of these slides could be about the theological background in Hamburg happen. These ideas that the children need to strengthen their own competence, but also need to learn about other religions from other children, and then recognize their concepts that they have together, and that is available throughout the lessons. Those things lead to greater peace in all the language. The acceptance and of other religions and other children is significantly strengthened, especially in comparison to other states, where when it comes to religious questions, you're going to be divided and not unified. First studies show that those that participate in the religious classes, for all of them, are more open and accepting to other religions. This model are starting to think about accepting concepts like this. The government in Germany cannot decide that by their own. The religious organizations have to decide together to do this. A critique that there is from non-religious families, they have expected criticism regarding their inadequate representation within the framework, that they don't want their child gets in any contact with religions. But right now we stand for it and we say, no, we need your perspective in this religious class. We need to have greater representation from you. And right now we're working on new lesson plans, and we also answer the questions of those that don't follow any religions. Although I must say, children older than 6, do they understand the different religions? Do they think of themselves as religious? In my experiences, it's mainly the influence the parents have with those classes, that they think their child might be poisoned through religion.
Gar nicht hier weitergeblättert, sorry. Das ist einmal Religionsunterricht für alle.
That's the religious classes for everyone. Because I have some time, I have another example that might fit for this, to show the opposite of borders with religious freedom. We've talked about those things because they're necessary. Because I have time, I'm going to show you this. They closed the Islamic Center in Hamburg. Some might have been there and might have seen this mosque in Alster in the middle of downtown. This mosque was closed in July. And I always want to talk about established in 1965, it maintained strong connections with the Iranian regime. The imam of the Islamic Center were brought directly from Tehran, and they were leaders of the imams, and they always belonged to the very educated people in the center of the Irani Shiites in a different continent. And there is something similar in London. But Ishitisha Imam, if I had a question, I went to the Imam in Hamburg to get my answers in theological questions. The mosque was built in the 60s due to donations from businessmen, but it was seen more and more due to its endorsement of politically extreme activities. And it was used to spread those extremist views. And because of our history with those that can change, that things that are extremists, so they used the opportunity to close and ban the clothes because they could not agree with the endorsement of the politically extremist activities it had. In this instance, political implications were referenced as justifications to close it. But what were the influences of that to the Muslims in Germany? There are a lot of different Muslims in Germany, and we don't want to attack the freedom of religion, but protect the community from the activists and not forbid the religion. Our minister made sure that it was not directed against the religion itself, but only against those that were involved with radicalization.
There was proof of observation of opposition politicians in Iran, based in the Iran Islamic Center of Hamburg, and this ban was to show that extremist activities would not be tolerated, but it also has an impact on religious tolerance. For the Shiites who live in Hamburg, many of them regularly went to the Blue Mosque, skipped other Shiite mosques in Hamburg. There were practical issues too, as we closed it, because there were also many personal documents for like marriages and such. They are now in the archives of the Ministry of the State. If someone wanted to do anything in Iran, then they needed this document. For us, there was, for those of us who work with religious policy, now it's a little harder for these Shiites to communicate with us. They have this feeling that they've lost their home. Right now, maybe if you look in Google later what happened in Hamburg, you can find pictures of how the Shiites in Hamburg are meeting in front of the mosque as part of a demonstration on Fridays for their prayers. We have great weather right now in Hamburg right now, but it's not always great, so that can't be a long-term solution. So in comparison, another example we can use is the USA. We also had very different ways to collaborate closely with religious communities, particularly in realms of religious education. where we work together with the state really closely for religious education. This collaboration supports the integration, but in the US, we have a constitutional separation of church and state. Sometimes there's more religious freedom for these religious groups because they don't have this kind of indirect control from the state, but then they've received less support from the state. From my viewpoint, there are disadvantages and advantages to these different approaches. We worry about peace in Germany more, and in the US, they worry more about this individual freedom. We can learn from each other, though, how we can support religious peace. And I would be really happy. We have a lot of time. I'd love to have a discussion here to think about what can we learn from each other, what are the advantages for religious freedom and this interaction with the state, and how can we support and foster religious freedom, and where are the borders of the state in the practice of religion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Should I sit?
Go ahead, sure.
Yep.
Sure, well, you can stay up if you want. You can take a seat, sit
you
down,
can-
have some chocolate milk and a brownie. You can only get these brownies in Provo, so live it up. Thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that presentation. You covered a lot of really important topics, and I'm glad we have some time to discuss them. Let's open it up for questions. I'll start because I'm the moderator and I want to. I love talking about religion and education and what are the boundaries of what gets taught in a school and what doesn't. And I love seeing how different countries and governmental systems approach those. When I loved this idea in Hamburg about having the teachers decide the curriculum, talk more about is there a limit on how much curriculum can be devoted to a certain faith tradition? Or how are these teachers coming together? Or minority faiths who say, I would like a little piece of the curriculum, and how do you accommodate not just larger religious traditions, but the minority traditions that exist in Germany?
That's a good question, because I did not explain that in my presentation. Who teaches and how's the teaching going on? In the curriculum, the 8 big religions I mentioned: Catholics, Protestants, Muslims, Jewish, Alevite, Baha'i, Hindu, and Buddhism. In every topic of the religious curriculum, in the curriculum is described in every topic how to explain maybe how people are talking about death in Christianity, in Judaism, and so on. And in the practice, of course, you can't teach in a class all these 8 religions. The teachers, they should focus on the 3 religions which are mainly ich mache das mal kurz auf Deutsch. Also
I'll say
die
this
3
quickly in German.
Religionen,
The 3 religions
die durch die Kinder in der Klasse, in der jeweiligen
who are
konkreten
best
Klasse am
represented
meisten
by the
vertreten
children in the
sind.
class.
So if I have a class of
if I have
20 children and 10
Class
of
of
them are
20 children and 10
Christians,
of them are Christians.
4 are Muslims,
4
1
are
is
Muslims,
Jewish, and
1 is
5
Jewish,
don't have
and
any
5 don't have any
religion,
religion.
then of course,
the
teacher
will
teaches Christianity,
teach Christianity, Judaism, and Islam.
Islam, and he teaches the point of view of
the point of view of the
non-confessional
non-confessional children.
And it's always
Switch on.
one teacher. So for 1 year, it's always the same teacher. It could be a Protestant teaching the Muslim, Catholic, Jewish pupils, but it could also be a Jewish teacher teaching the Muslim, the Alevite, the Protestant children for a year. It could change to the next year if you have another teacher for religious education in the 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and so on.
Thank you. It's very interesting. All right. Yes, Janet.
Yeah, they are looking to Hamburg and wondering, at least some of them are wondering if this could be the solution for our situation. Because one thing which happens, we have this constitutional right that every children could have religious education in his or her personal religion at school. But practically in many cities, in a class, if you have in a school just 3 Hindu children or 7 Alevites and so on, you can't give them religious education in school. You need a certain amount of children of the same belief. And so very often happens that there theoretically is a curriculum for them, but practically there's no teaching. And at the moment then, children of these religions, they have to participate in another religious education, but which is not inter-religious, it's not cross-religious education, but maybe the Alevites choose to participate in religious education for Protestants or something like that. Ralph could explain that.
No, I wasn't going to volunteer to explain, but I have 2 questions about it.
Okay.
Practical questions. For one, you mentioned that some non-religious parents have voiced concerns about their children and the preference for them not to attend, and your response was, or your government's response is that enrollment is obligatory. Are there any exceptions? I could imagine Jehovah's Witnesses, for example,
Yeah.
probably not want their children to be exposed to any religious teaching other than their own. First question. The second question, following up on what Holly asked, what about minorities that are not represented there? And you said that teachers are supposed to focus on the 3 religions that are mostly represented in the class, but what if there's a class with an Armenian Orthodox child, a Quaker, a Sikh, and a Latter-day Saint? Is there any flexibility in the curriculum to then, outside of those 8 pillars of the curriculum, explain or refer to what minority groups believe in practice?
Well, of course, to the first question, there is a chance for the parents to say, my child should not participate in religious education. But in the primary school, that leads to the situation that the child is hanging around somewhere in the school. Of course, somebody is obeying that it does not make any jokes and so on, but it does not get any education during that time. That leads to the situation that many parents say, well, it's better to get any education than non-education. Mostly it's just Jehovah's Witnesses who use that option. And the other question is, of course, first of all, if by incident you have a class with an amount of children from 5 religions participating in this curriculum, a Baha'i child, a Jewish child, 3 Alevites, 4 Protestants, and 5 Catholics or so on, the teacher is free to use everything from the curriculum for the 5 different religions. For the other religions, there are options to include, in some cases, by other instruments, the views of them, because it's always about that the child itself should be represented in its own belief in the class. And we have this discussion of the smaller religious minorities in Hamburg, how they could participate in the development of the curricula. And this is more, we as politicians, we have to make a mediation with the other 8 bigger religions, how to include more groups. We have this claim, it's a religious education for all. And I'm always saying we must secure that it's also religious education by all. Because otherwise, if it's not by all, we cannot fulfill this aim that we have religious education for all.
Okay. Yes, in the back, and then Jeff.
Can I make a quick comment really fast?
Yes.
I know we missed some of the first questions, but if we could have question askers speak into the microphone, that allows interpretation to happen.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you. Thank you. Or yes, okay. Good tip, thank you.
Yep.
If I understood you correctly, you said that children who were engaged in religious education were found to be more tolerant of others. If I understood what you said correctly, is that based on some research? And if so, what research?
Yeah, it's based on a research done by the Institute for Quality of Education of the city of Hamburg. If you're interested, unfortunately, it's just in German, but it's a 208-page methodological, very sufficient evaluation.
And was that primary school children or high school children or both?
They evaluated both because we have this, we have another thing, so this religious education for all without another subject for the non-confessional children is from the 1st until the 6th grade. From 7th grade until finishing high school in Germany, then you have an additional, you can choose ethics or philosophy, additional to religious education. So we have to cross-check both groups of age.
Thank you.
Jeff?
I might be questioning what you mean by education. And the reason I say that is throughout the last 2 days, we have heard that if we want to understand someone's religion, we need to have someone who is explaining it to us who is a part of that religion. And yet, it's organized in a way totally different from that. Someone who happens to, and I would assume that the teacher might not even be one of those, from one of those religious traditions, and yet because whatever those 5 are that are in the class, he or she is going to be teaching about them. How does that educate individuals about what the religion is really all about?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, it's important that you have a teacher who has also a belief. So he has an idea of a concept of a religious faith. And of course, the teacher, with the teachers, we do something more or less like in Indonesia as well. Yeah. First of all, important is that the teacher knows about his own religion, about his own belief, and he sees the difference to the other religions, so that he or she can teach the children in the differences, in the commons, and he can foster the child to, the single child to, just to deal with its own religious belief. And there are several methods to work on these topics. So example, if we talk about death in school and the concept of death, of course, the children, they go home, they discuss it with their parents, with their aunts, with their uncles, the grandfathers. What are the traditions in our religion? What do we think about what happens after death, and so on? This is one possibility. And of course, maybe it's similar to every other country and every other school. They do visits. So they visit a mosque, they visit a synagogue, they visit a church, and they speak to a pastor, to an imam, to a rabbi about his concrete experiences. So this is also part of making experience outside of the school. But of course, they have every week 2 hours of religious education, religious teaching inside the school. So it's not only a single moment, not just one day when you have the chance to meet another religion outside of your school, but most of all, they learn from each other. This is the most important thing, just to understand that just the neighbor, your classmates, they have maybe a different belief, but we have many things in common, but also to understand what is the difference between my belief and the belief of somebody else.
Can I just pop in with a follow-up question, Michael, if that's okay? In the classroom where you have one teacher, maybe it's a Protestant teacher, but for the section on Muslim belief on these certain topics, is that content drafted by a Muslim teacher? Okay, so it's a Protestant teacher who's presenting it, but the curriculum has been drafted by someone from that faith tradition?
Yep.
Okay.
No, they are all developing the whole curriculum by its own. So the Muslims, they contribute to the curriculum, the Muslim perspective and the Muslim topics and how to explain it and what are the main aims of understanding. And the teachers have to use it.
Thank you. Yes. All the way in the back.
Thank you very much. I live in Belgium, not far from Germany.
Yeah.
So I do follow, if not very actively, what happens in Germany. As you had mentioned, which I wasn't aware, that the German constitution provides for religious education in school, but you also explained that in practice it's not always possible because schools, not every school has enough students from different religious
Yes.
community. So my question was that, are there any possibilities or opportunities for some schools being together and to have a common syllabus to catering to the Muslim students, for example, or to any other religious denomination, so that, you know, together within like 10 schools, or not even 10, might be too big a number, so that the students do have an opportunity for interreligious or interfaith kind of, you know, living together. I myself, I can draw examples from my own life that I went to Christian missionary school, or rather convent. I'm a Muslim, and my best friend is a Christian. I think, you know, it happened because we were together in the same school. I had Islamic studies, she had catechism, and, you know, it did not make me more of a Christian or a less of a Muslim, but I think, you know, it helped me in my life to appreciate each other. We enjoyed each other's, you know, religious ceremonies. I got invited to Christmas parties, and she came to our house. Or not only she, other friends also who are Christians would come for Eid holidays to spend time with us. So it is important. I think, you know, since the Constitution provides for it, it's excellent. So what you need is ways to see how that constitutional provision can be safeguarded. And if I may ask also, I saw that this Muslim center in Hamburg was very recently, use the word banned, but it had been in existence since 1960s, many years. So did extremism only started in the recent, and how was this closure being done? Was it through discussion with the center authorities, or it was just a decision by the government? And who followed that extremism kind of definition? Sometimes, you know, religious views and political views, there are some gray areas, unfortunately, but, you know, that kind of perception might lead to abrupt decision of closure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I will answer the last one at first. It has been a long process. We have in Germany, we have the, how to translate that? Maybe the translators could do that, the Verfassungsschutz.
There's the Office for the Right of the Protection of the Constitution.
Inland CIA.
Yes, it's a domestic
They are protecting
intelligence
the
agency.
Constitution with Secret Service methods. And they are reporting every year. It's a public report, you can read that. And the ICLRS, the Islamic Center, is part of this report on constitutional threats since 1993. So they knew they are under observation, and we did a lot of talks to the community, to the imam, to the mullahs sent to Hamburg, to tell them what is the reason why you are under observation, what's the behavior which threatens the constitution, what would be possible changes of your behavior to avoid banning your institution. And in the end, it did not help. It got even worse over the years. And the final thing happened when in Iran, there was this uprising of the women after the killing of Masa Amini, sorry. And their comments had been very offensive against those women, and they celebrated the killing. Not the killing, but the other way. the killing of leaders of Iran revolution. There had been some fest ceremonies inside of the mosque where they showed their dedication to the Iran regime, to the Iran leaders, and not only to the religious leaders, but also to the political leaders. And of course, it's a quite different thing and topic with Iran, yeah, because I was very long, in my responsibility as spokesman for religious policies, I tried in a way to defend them as well against other politicians, explaining them this linkage between the government and Iran, no, the linkage to Iran for the Shia, yeah? Just imagine that Iran would be a democratic republic like the Netherlands. Still the leaders, the theological leaders will sit in Iran and they will send letters to the Iran, because one mention of the Secret Service, of our inland Secret Service was, hey, the mullah, the imam is writing letters to the leaders of the Iran. And I asked him, what are they corresponding about politics or about theological issues? Because it's normal, you can't blame the Archbishop of Hamburg if he writes a letter to the Pope. Yeah, that's the thing about it. But it has been a long, long discussion, and in the end it was a decision by the Federal Minister for the Interior Affairs, and the police came, closing everything. And now, of course, they have the right to sue the federal government. They will do that, and we will have a court decision within maybe 1 or maybe 4 years if this was legal or not. But in the meantime, of course, in Hamburg, concrete, we have to handle and to deal with the Shia community. The other question about, I understand it like, couldn't several schools put together all maybe the Alevite pupils in one class from 4 or 5 different schools? Was it right? Yeah. This could happen in big cities, but people always forget that Germany is a country where most of the people live in rural provinces with just one school in a small town, and though they don't have the chance to do that there. And the other thing is, I'm not convinced that it's a good thing, especially if we consider our topic of the symposium, because it's my personal experience is the first thing when I learned that I'm different from other children was in religious education. I got Protestant religious education, and it was very good. I had brilliant teachers, but my Catholic friends, they had been in another class. And so what did we do in the schoolyard? When we got in fights, we had fights, Protestants against Catholics. Because that was the thing we could decide as 6-year-old children, hey, that's our difference, yeah? We are Protestants, those are the Catholics, so let's make a fight against them. And I guess this is stupid, that children learn religious is something which separates us from each other. They should learn religion is something which connects us. We have different ways of expression, but it's something which connects us.
Okay, I think, Chayan, you had your hand up a long time, and then we'll get to everyone.
Thank you very much. I have quick 2 questions. First one is, what is the qualification process for early teachers? Okay, early teachers. Then second one, do you have a state common textbook for early teaching, or each school has its own, the early, textbook? If so, do you have a process of accreditation of the textbook accreditation process? So I'm just wondering about that.
May I ask you to repeat the first question, about the teachers?
Yeah. The early teachers, I think they have to know pedagogy, education, okay? Mm-hmm. And also religion.
Yeah.
Okay, so early teachers in qualifications, they have to also get some information or the nurturing, education,
yeah.
Okay? So quite complicated. And also they have also the basic understanding of pedagogy.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, how does, the early teachers, to become? Okay, simply they invite the religious, community.
No, it's more complicated. If you want to teach religious education in Hamburg or in Germany, you just have to go to university and study as a teacher. And usually in Germany, it's teachers always have two subjects. So you go to university learning, for example, teaching math, and you learn to teach religious education. And in Hamburg, those who decide to study religious education, they also have to participate in classes for Judaism, Islam, Alawites, and so on. So we have the professors at University of Hamburg. So they should get a good overview, and also all our teachers, they have to continue learning after they finished university. And the teachers for religious education, they always get some instruction in how to teach different religious beliefs every year. The question of the common textbook is a good one because they are developing the material special for Hamburg. We don't have a Hamburg religious education for all textbook because the plans, the curriculars, they have been redeveloped just over the last 2 years. In this school year, since 23, they are used the first time. And they have decided to develop material in common for all the teachers on a digital form. But this textbook idea in our times is a bit old-fashioned. Because you write a textbook, you publish it, and the world has changed. And teachers tell us, well, wow, a new textbook, but I can't use it. It's not up to date.
A question right in the front, and then we'll go to Zach.
You encourage or
Let's get a microphone to you.
oh, sorry.
For the translators.
I gathered from what you said that children could go to the mosque, they could go to their church and have some religious education. Am I right in that? And is it possible that they could do that if they had an hour during the regular school period for 1 hour, perhaps? Would that be allowed under your system?
No, I meant something different. It's just like the class visits together with their teacher a mosque. So that's
Like they
maybe
go on a
more
field
like
trip.
a daily how do you say?
A field trip.
A field trip, yeah. They do field trips to mosques, to synagogues, and so on. Or they invite a rabbi to their class just to get some information by somebody else, not only the Protestant teacher, but also a rabbi about Judaism. Of course, every children is free to join some education and teaching at his own community as well, at going to the church on Sunday, school, or something like that. But we cannot transform these forms of faith education in churches or in religious communities. You can't transfer that to school. That's the guarantee by state. We allow all the religions to teach, to have religious education in schools in their own belief and their own faith. But the standard of education, this is set by the state. And this needs teachers who have a state examination and not just being good in convincing children.
Then one other question, just out of curiosity. I think you said 28% of the Americans don't, or the U.S. don't declare a religion, and 38, is it, or was it the other way around? 28% of the Americans don't declare, or have not declared a religion.
Yep.
In Germany, it's 38%.
Yep.
How much would that number change if there was not a Kirchensteuer?
Oh, this is a good question. Besides being a member of parliament, I work for the Protestant church.
I've had many German friends tell me, well, I'd declare a religion, but I'd have to pay Kirchensteuer.
Yeah. We always discuss it that people leave churches because of the Kirchensteuer. That's true. In fact, in Hamburg, we have even 50% of people with no belief. I don't know. if we don't have Kirchensteuer, because if we don't have Kirchensteuer, the church tax, the churches don't have any income. And the question is, do we have so many people who, without this church tax, are there enough people to contribute to the church, that the church still can exist in the way it exists today? But of course, especially the big ones, the Catholic and the Protestant churches in Germany, they always are complaining about not having money. I'm working for the Protestant church as well. I know that about that, but they, compared to the rest of the world, they are really rich churches. There's this funny thing in 1803, after Napoleon, we had a secularization, so the churches had to hand over all their land to the state, but they got a compensation. They got a compensation, a yearly compensation, and it still exists. So every year they get millions and billions by the state for. They really did a good business with this secularization in 1803. Sometimes it's a bit funny. My uncle was a priest in a little town in Bavaria, and every year he got 10 sacks of wheat, because in 1803 his dominion has to give up the piece of land, and so that the priest doesn't starve, the community has to give him 10 sacks full of wheat every year. Nowadays he gets that in money, of course, not in practice, but they still have money. But other way. Ron, that's the big question. If we dispose church tax, do the people stay in church and pay something voluntarily? The other thing is the figure of people, the official figure of people who are registered in Protestant and Catholic Church depends on the system of church tax. Without church tax, we would not know how many people feel themselves to be Catholic or Protestant, but everybody has to register. You know, it's not the church that asks me if I'm a Protestant, it's the state who asks me for taxation. Are you a Protestant? Are you a Catholic? Are you a Jew? Are you Orthodox? Who gets your money? And so we have this detailed statistics for all those communities who use this instrument of church taxation.
Question back here. Young woman who's been waiting a long time.
Thank you. I must humbly apologize for asking a question while I had missed the presentation. So maybe it was mentioned, and it may also seem to be a minor detail, but I repeatedly heard you mentioning Alawites as a separate entity.
Yep.
Whereas, as far as I know, Alawites are Muslims. So how do Alawites in Hamburg self-identify as something else than Muslims? That would be very surprising indeed. Thank you.
Well, interesting. I was always waiting for this question.
Good.
That's true. Hamburg did two things in his history. We have been the first independent state in 1820, recognizing the independency of the Latin American states, like Brazil, Colombia, and so on. And we have been the first state worldwide who recognized the Alawites as a religion by themselves in 2010.
And was that because they claimed that?
Yeah, of course they claim that. They claim that they are something different than the Muslims, and especially the Muslims claim that they are something different.
Yes, the
and
reason
not
why
belong to the Muslims.
The reason why I was late was because I was just up there listening to Farid Ahmad of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, who was talking about the fact that in Pakistan, their sect, their community has been declared non-Muslim.
Yep.
And that doesn't have the same kind of consequences as in Hamburg. It's very serious. So if these people are happy by calling themselves non-Muslims and accepting that other Muslims call them non-Muslims, then perhaps there's no problem there. But the same thing can have very, very serious and violent consequences elsewhere. So
that's true.
It's a big issue. Actually.
It's a big issue. It's a big issue, especially for our Turkish migrants. And in Turkey, the Alevites, they are not respected. Yeah, they don't have the religious freedom like elsewhere. And many of the Alevites, they develop their own conscious that they are a religion by their own in the diaspora in Germany and other European countries outside of Turkey, because it was the first time that they could just freely practice their own way of interpreting Islam. Of course, they feel like a family, but maybe it's more like Protestants and Catholics or so on. Yeah, but also we have a Protestant contribution to religious education, and we have a Catholic contribution to religious education, and we don't have a Christian contribution to religious education. And so the Alevites, they have their own contribution. What is the Alevi view of way of life? And it's a bit different from the Islam. And also, it's a good thing that they are teach together and not separated, so that the Muslims and the Alevite children can see what do we have in common, and what are the little differences between us.
We have a long question back here. Thanks for being so patient.
Of course. Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. I have, I guess, 2 questions. So I went to school for several years in Germany, and we didn't have as many, we had Protestant class and we had Catholicism. And then for everyone else, we went to ethics. Mm-hmm. And that was in Hessen, in that area. And it worked great. From what I can remember, I enjoyed it. I'm sure I would have enjoyed visiting the Catholic class or the Protestant class as well, though. And so you may have asked this before or explained this before. How do we decide which students go to which class? Do the students decide that? And then, I guess, or their parents, or... and then how does each Bundesland or each state decide what religious education to provide? Like I said, where I went to school, it seemed like that was the ethics class, I guess, was a good way to incorporate non-religious people.
Yep.
But yeah, those 2 questions.
Yeah, thanks for the question. First of all, I have to explain that all the 16 Bundesländer, they are responsible for education. So you have a difference between the 16 Bundesländers, the 16 German states, in the way they have built up their educational system. Of course, we have some common standards in Germany, but they are part of a dealing between the 16 Bundesländer. The federal government does not have any influence on it. That's one thing. So you can make in Hessen a different experience than in Bavaria or in Hamburg. Sometimes the system is a bit stupid, because if you study teaching in one Bundesland, it could happen that if you move to another Bundesland, you are not allowed to teach anymore, because your examination from Baden-Württemberg is not recognized in Bavaria. That happened to my father. It's the parents who decide which religious education a child gets until they are 14. If you are 14 in Germany, you have your, it's the first step of growing up. Then you can decide by your own about your religious belonging. You could quit church, you can change your faith, and you even can decide what are you doing in school, which classes do you attend. So it's then your decision. And that's the moment when many children or young men, young girl, change from religious education to ethics, because they want to make some different experience, and they want to get rid of what their parents are telling them. So you can do that with 14. And in the end, who decides what religions are taught? Usually the religions by themselves. Every religion has its own right to offer teachings, to offer religious education in the classes. But of course, they have to be big enough
Okay.
to do that. And as you mentioned, the Ahmadiyya, for example, the Ahmadiyya, they are a recognized religion in Germany as well by its own, but the Ahmadis, they decided not to participate in this religious education in Hamburg. They are just satisfied with the way it goes currently, because there is some kind of Muslim education in religious education, and this is enough for them. And they don't want to mess up with the other Muslim communities and claiming, hey, we have to participate also in the development of the curriculum.
Thank you very much. We are out of time, and just appreciate, Michael, so much, your preparation and your questions and answers. We've all been richly blessed by all the things you taught us, so thank you. Thanks to all of you for participating, for your questions.
Thank you for
My pleasure.
your moderation.
My pleasure. All right, we have a brief break, and then we'll meet for our final session back up on the third floor.